Welcome into the mock draft for the Washington Redskins. Washington, you got me. You got me. I'm too small to cancel, though, so fuck it. Like and subscribe. All right, mock draft for the Washington Commanders after the blockbuster Laramie Tunsil trade, after the first day of free agency. We're going to get into it, see what that trade does for their draft. Obviously, they didn't give up any major assets this year, but I still want to go through it, do a full 7-round mock, and talk about their draft class. All right, we'll get into it right now. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do this. This is the trade. Obviously, Laramie Tunsil is included in this trade, but this is the trade, just so you guys can get a visual representation of how insanely good this trade was. You're getting a 4th-round pick this year. You're giving away a 3rd this year, so you're really just moving back in the draft this year. So it's almost nothing from a draft perspective. I did not realize that when I went to start recording this video. I had to look it up to get the exact details and realized, wait a minute, that's insane. But yeah, according to Adam Schefter, that's what this trade is, and then you're giving up a 7th this year, which is totally fine because I don't know the 250th best draft prospect anyway, so that makes it easier for me. And then, yeah, you're giving up a 2nd and a 4th next year. Obviously, those are some valuable picks. In real life, I would think there's going to be a real conversation about trading back and trying to, regain some of those picks for next year. That 2nd, obviously, is pretty valuable, but, I mean, you're getting a 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle for very, very little draft capital this year and really very reasonable draft capital next year. So we're going to force that trade through. And we are going to start the draft, and we're going to see where we're going with the 29th pick. God, I forgot how good you guys were this year. 29th pick in the draft. Washington is on the way up. Man, it's got to be fun to just nail a starting quarterback, right? It makes everything easier. All right, so this is about the range where I'm always going to say, you got to go D-line. I'm not going to be the biggest fan of PFF's ranking system by any means, but I do agree that D-line is so deep, and when you get into this part of the draft, I would not be surprised if you just saw a run of it. So I want to look at that first. I'm going to kind of give you guys the names that I think. Walter Nolan, Derek Hammond are going to be the first two. I know that you just signed Ken Law to 3 years, $30 million, so $10 million a year. Maybe slight overpay if I'm being honest, but I mean, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. And obviously he adds to Daron Payne, who I don't know. I feel like he's not nearing the end of his career, but he's definitely plateaued or is starting to decline a little bit. And then you drafted Newton last year, I believe, in the 2nd round. So you got some names on that defensive line. I don't hate adding another one, but maybe a little rich. I probably prefer edge. Armstrong is the only name that I can think that you guys have off the top of my head. So I'd probably lean edge over defensive tackle for them in the 1st round if I was looking at defense. And well, quickly, I think cornerback's a pretty big need as well. I don't view any of these guys as a 1st-round corners, right? I really think where you're drafting in the 1st, if you wanted to target corner, I mean, really, it's just probably not going to happen because you got the Texas kid and then the Michigan kid and obviously Travis Hunter that are all just going to be gone before the start of the 20s even, let alone the 29th pick in the draft. So I think corner's kind of off the table for the 1st round. 2nd, 3rd, we could talk about it. You traded for Deebo Samuel. I would look at wide receiver, but again, none of the top wide receivers that I want are going to be here, and we can probably circle back to that later on. Any other positions we might want to look at? Interior offensive line would be interesting to me. Specifically, I was trying to see if Banks was going to still be there, but it looks like, okay, Kevin Banks just went off. So, yeah, looking at the board, who I like in this range, other than, like, if you just wanted to go running back, I obviously would definitely consider a running back. Colston Loveland is a name that I would love for you guys. That's actually... Ooh, I don't know if I don't expect him to be there when Washington drafts either. I really don't. That's something I would consider. Scorton, I actually really like. I really love him. Just a big physical, like he's an imposing edge. I'm actually a big fan of his. So as I talk it out, I'm definitely going to end up being between Scorton here, the edge out of Texas A&M, and then the Michigan tight end, Loveland. I just don't expect Loveland to still be there on the board. Scorton, I would expect to be a 2nd-round pick. Looking at this board, I do think some of these tackles are probably going to ultimately go ahead of Scorden. But at the end of the day, I do think I just have to take the positional value in a Scorden over Loveland. And that's a tough one for me because there is a tier gap. Like Loveland is the other tight end that should go in the first round. And then for me, there's definitely a pretty big drop off, probably a bigger drop off than there is at edge. But I just think positional value, the need, I really want to improve Washington's defense in this mock draft. So we're going to focus on that. And then at some point, we're going to get another weapon for Jaden Daniels. I'm just not sure exactly when. And then, of course, we still have some pretty good edge names here. I don't know. Maybe that was the bad pick. Let me know in the comments. I'm almost immediately regretting that. I'm going to run with it just because, I mean, that's kind of the point of this process, kind of see how it's going to play out. I like these names here. I really love Jack Sawyer, either of these Ohio State kids. I actually weirdly like JT here a little bit more than Jack Sawyer, even though I think Jack Sawyer probably gets drafted higher and he has just such a high floor. I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see where those guys actually go. I do think both of them could easily be off the board by the time Washington picks in the second. But we address the edge. I want to look at defensive line again here just one more time because I'm a big fan of, fixing a position in 1 year. But looking at these names, yeah, all the top tier defensive tackles are off the board, and we're just going to find better value at other positions at this point. Let's look at cornerback. Again, I do want to help corner. Darian Porter is a really interesting name here. Big physical corner out of Iowa State. I really like him a lot. A little bit of a project guy. I don't think he's a complete player yet, but I mean, he has all the measurables. He's going to go in this range. I could see him going a lot earlier, especially because for me, it kind of dips out, and there's going to be corners that go ahead of him that aren't as physically impressive as him, but maybe just play the position a little bit better, maybe a little faster. But, I mean, Darian Porter's quick. I'm just going to see if they have it here. Yeah, 6'4". He's huge. I don't have his speed. I'm not exactly sure what he ran. He's a converted wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, just overall, really, really interesting prospect. That's a name that I would definitely think about, especially in a class that I don't think is quite as deep as it has been in other years. And then if we look at offensive line, that's the only other position that I'm going to really think about for Washington in the second. And just for me, Ursere is interesting, but we kind of filled the tackle role. I'm more interested in interior. And interior's kind of deep. I think we can find some pretty good players later on in the draft. So I'm pretty okay. I think obviously there's going to be a drop-off. We're going to get to the fourth round, and we might miss out on some of those guys, but I feel pretty comfortable with it. Last position I would look at is running back, Dylan Sampson. I would really like. I don't think Washington's in a position where they need to draft a running back this early, though. I want to target that position. I want to add a little depth. Obviously, Eckler is nearing the end of his career. Brian Robinson, really good player, but he's feels like one of those one-contract guys that Washington was able to get in mid-rounds. It's probably time to do that again, and this is a great running back draft to do that, but I think we can wait to the fourth for that. So I think ultimately I'm going to land on Darian Porter here. I just think his upside, his potential is really, really good, and you can mold him into a legitimate cornerback one in the NFL. All right, let's see what we got here. Ton of names off the board. Let's look at wide receiver. I wouldn't mind adding a third. I'm not in love with this wide receiver class, man. I'm not. Would like to get maybe a Thornton late. Like he could maybe fill in that De'Ami Brown role later on. Maybe not year one. He's very raw, but like he's big and fast. So it's just traits. You're just drafting traits at that point. So he'd be a name that I would think about. Can have good and bad things to say about a couple other names on this list. I don't know every name on this list. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm never going to bullshit you guys, by the way. Like I have a full-time job. I'll know like the top 150, top 175 names, but when we get outside of that, I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm getting there. I'm going to have it all down by draft time. I mentioned running back earlier. I do want to look at that. I also want to look, see, this is why you wait, because you just have some legitimate names here that are going to fill in year one and could develop into an RB1 workhorse guy down the line. And then tight end is the other spot that I would look at. If we missed on tight end in this draft, I don't think it's the end of the world. Obviously, Zach Ertz, you re-signed him. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I do want to add a younger guy to the roster, and I definitely think Washington would think about it. Again, I thought really hard about taking one in the first, but these are not these are not premium names for me, and I think I'd rather add the running back over the tight end here because I think you're just going to get more out of that player, that position at this point in the draft. So that's kind of where I land and where I lean. Let's look at guard. It's the only other position I would really consider here. And that just feels fourth is just a little early for some of these names. I like these names a lot. And there's definitely a gap. We don't have another pick until 206, so we're almost punting on offensive line if we take the running back. And look, that's a real conversation I think Washington would have. I'm going to take the upside of running back. I'm just going to take, I think, as many weapons you can get around Jaden Daniels, the better. And I went into this draft knowing that I wanted to add at least one more weapon at some point. And even if he's not a huge factor this year, look, injuries at the running back position are very, very common. So I'm gonna lean on that side of it, and we're gonna go ahead and take Damian Martinez out of Miami. Really, really solid running back that's gonna fall in this range. He's just my favorite on the board, but I could make an argument for any of these guys. I could make an argument for Jaquiz Hunter. I could make an argument for Etienne. I can make an argument for a lot of these guys, but I'm going to lean on my guy, Damian Martinez here in the fourth round for Washington. I would love for this particular pick to be a running back. There's just so many good ones. One of the greats is going to fall, and you're going to get a really, really good value on a really, really good playmaker at that point in the draft. So now we get into the later parts and just kind of want to fill out the roster a little bit. I want to look at safety. Elijah Clark's a name that I really like, hard-hitting safety out of Syracuse. He's interesting. Moving on, let's see if any of my offensive linemen. Ooh, Miles Frazier's still there. I like him a lot. See, I mean, it's kind of deep here because I like some of these names. I'm going to go ahead and take Frazier here with the 206th pick. I think he's just a high-floor guy. I think he has a really good chance to start. Maybe not year one, obviously. At this range of the draft, you're probably not drafting a starter, but I do think he has a chance to work in and develop and become a starter in this league down the line. And then, like I said earlier, like we're getting into the range where I'm not going to know a lot of these names. So I want to go tight end. I want to add a piece here for you guys. Shortchanging there a little bit at the end, but look, a 7-round mock is kind of tough when you really only know the first 5 or 6 rounds. But I want to at least throw in some names, throw in some positions there at the end just to talk about a little bit. So let's go ahead and look at our final list. Here we go. Look, I really like Scorton is a little early at 29, but I felt like you had to get an edge, and obviously I kind of talked through that conversation. If we would have gone tight end there, we probably go edge in the second, and then we're just not getting a corner probably, or we're not getting one of the caliber of a Darian Porter. I think you got 2 starters on the defense, day 1 starters on the defense, at least, especially Scorton. Porter might take a little bit of time to develop, but again, high upside guy who can turn into a really, really solid player. You get to just look at this beautiful trade that you got here again one more time. And then finish it out with a playmaker in Damian Martinez. I really like him. And then, some depth pieces at guard and tight end who could definitely develop into some real players for you guys. So that's the mock. Let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe. It really means a lot if you add a comment down there to talk about it. Helps the algorithm a whole lot. Let me know what you guys think after an absolutely amazing start to free agency for Washington. This is my thoughts on your draft. Going to be really, really interesting to see what else Washington does down the line, what other moves they make. Obviously, kind of quiet other than just adding the big name in Kinlaw, but and then obviously we had a couple big trades. So Washington's really making some moves, really doing everything they can to add some pieces around Jaden Daniels and really put together a team that I think could compete obviously they compete. They go to the NFC Championship last year. What's the next step this year? We'll find out. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.